Okay, so my name is Taekyoon. I'm from South Korea. As I said, identifying myself very first session by asking a question to Charles. I'm not a political I'm not the economist. I'm kind of political scientist. I'm actually particularly the international, politics. So some kind of politics of power struggle between China and U.S. So I will try to talk about a little bit different story today. Quite an outlier from the other papers. I learned a lot from the economists, from all the panelists yesterday and today. But I'm trying to say a little bit different kind of angle to view on current situation between rivalry between China and U.S., especially during and after coronavirus pandemic situation. So I will start with the very gloomy the picture photo like this, the earth wearing mask. But the Korean friend here, Yoon, just started with a very, the kind of good kind of image of South Korea. But now I'm just starting with gloomy the photo. Sorry about that. Okay, some introductory mentioning. Everyone well knows, the global governance, especially WHO, World Health Organization, is quite failed to handle the COVID-19. And there are many different perspectives on the activities and rules of the WHO, sometimes very negative and sometimes very positive. So especially the Trump administration, the US, they harshly criticized the WHO and then decided to withdraw the membership from the WHO. And Biden or just take the different stance towards the WHO. Anyway, so because of China, the contribution to WHO, the U.S. They thought that WHO is kind of the arms of kind of the extended arms of the China's engagement into the global governance. And also if you see all the G7, except probably the Canada, our major countries, so-called the advanced economies, they struggle to handle COVID-19. Kind of they have a big number of the confirmed cases of COVID-19. So we can say that not always we can say the democracy is on better regime than authoritarian or non-democracies in handling the COVID-19. So we cannot define democracy the right answer to handle COVID-19, because there are some kind of variants and there's some exceptions. So it's not easy to generalize which one is better political system. And then the WHO leadership also blamed, as I said, and questioned, and how we can I don't know, they want the right track of WHO. So I will talk about the next slide, especially the financial structure of WHO, co-funding, non-co-funding, and then co-funding. Non-co-funding is always earmarked by the donors to the WHO. So the WHO no enough money to handle COVID-19 in advance. So I think that's one of the reasons why I can say in a global governance, especially in a crisis of health security, is failure. And the second one is obviously in a struggle between China and US, like the strategic competition, or the G7, the initiative of building back better world, or the partnership for global infrastructure and investment. That's one thing. And the other one is, obviously China's the BRI, the Belt and Road Initiative. So how we can see some kind of the middle power formation, or the not US 100% allies to US, or the supporter of China's position, how we can see some kind of the middle positioning of different countries, and then how we can put them into the global governance, and then how to reform current problems of global governance. So that's my question. And then I'm going to find some solution from the East Asia. Right. So as I said, some global health governance in crisis, and then its failure. So one of the big reason, that's my opinion. Probably Jomo can add a little bit because he just worked for the FAO for a long time. So the co-funding and non-co-funding, as I mentioned, the co-funding means 100% the WHO or other UN agencies can use those money for their own purpose. But non-core funding is not core funding to WHO. So something is the conditioned, so earmarked by donors' preferences. So WHO cannot use that money for their own kind of plan. So now is the corona pandemic is, comes out. And then the WHO should be engaging, but there's no enough money to identify what kind of the reasons, sources of corona pandemic. So that could be one of the reasons why we can say the corona pandemic situation, as well as it's related to the global governance, is not working. And then second thing, as I mentioned, the US-China strategic competition. I will show you later some kind of map, so-called Quad or Indo-China Japanese initiative under the Abe Shinzo leadership, the FOIC, free and open Indo-Pacific strategy. That's one thing. And then the other sub kind of level under the G7 initiative, the P3W or PGIA. And then some kind of club governance, G7, G20, G77. So there is no one big authority, centralized authority in global governance to control, regulate the behavior of the state. So everyone knows the IR theories, such as the realism, any single country in the world, they just work for its own interest, national interest. I mean, other than that, there's no any incentive to collaborate or cooperate with the other countries. So the G7, G20, they have their mandates and the purposes. So probably sometimes it's not that collaborative between 2 or 3 different the platforms of club governance. Okay, so this is one example of the internal structure of the finances. The case of WHO. So WHO funding structure, if you see the green color, almost like 85%, that's non-core funding. The only 15, that's the free money for them to use their own purposes and plans. So it's quite, I think, it's very gloomy, right? So if you see another case, WFP, the World Food Program, almost like the 95% is non-core. So this is one of the reasons the crisis in health security, I guess. So the thing is how we can restore, how we can reform this kind of the distorted mechanism, the infrastructure of the financing. So that's just throughout the very biggest question to all of you. And secondly, the power politics. So my specialty is power politics. So I don't know the development economics. So about it once again, it's quite a new kind of the story I just share with you. So we can say the current situation, especially Biden administration, just to try to find some the allies or the collaborator from in East Asia or the Asia as a whole. So second round of pivot to Asia policy. So first round is definitely the Obama administration, and this is second. But the China, I mean, the competition with China has been deepening. So that is different, I think, the level of analysis between the first and the second round of pivot to Asia. So the lack of the collective action for global governance, how we can reform the infrastructure, as I already mentioned, one of the example of the distorted situation of the financing mechanism of the WHO, that's the core versus non-core. A core is always bigger than the non-core funding. The non-core is bigger than the core funding, sorry about it. Because fragmented, if you see the Indo-Pacific region, so many different platforms or the kind of level of the mini-lateralism initiated by sometimes China, sometimes US, sometimes Japan, sometimes Korea, sometimes India, sometimes Turkey. So recently Turkey, engaged, I mean, they joined the kind of little bit the loose way of the competition with the other, the Asian partners. I'm going to show you later with the African countries. So if you look at the bottom, the US, Japan, India, Australia, they formed so-called Quad, the 4 major allies to the so-called the US stance towards the BRI, China's the BRI initiative. And then China, of course, is very famous, the kind of initiative, that's the Belt and Road Initiative. And then how about South Korea? South Korea, back in May of 2022, we changed the regime. I mean, the government from the progressive to conservative. So during the Moon Jae-in, he's kind of the progressive, the leader of South Korea, the former president. He got the different idea. We cannot support 100% U.S. or China. So kind of the equal distance between two giants. The so-called the southern, new southern policy. So we're gonna make some friends in ASEAN and India. But now, after the May of 2020, the new guy elected, Mr. Yoon, he's quite conservative, pro-market, and pro-US, pro-ally. So he's changed all, kind of former president's policies. So now we are now moving from the new southern policy to joining Quad, just like Japan, just like India, just like the Australia. So we will see soon, but probably the very powerful ally to US in the game of China-US, the stresses competition. So this is the map. So if you see the blue line is the so-called Quad, so Japan and the West, India and Australia and US, and then South Korea could be, I don't know exactly, but I'm not sure, but try to join the Quad as the fifth, the member of the platform. And the red line is the famous, the so-called BRI. So these kind of, some conflicting with each other, I guess. And then as I mentioned, the 2021 G7 meeting in the UK, they declared like so-called B3W, Building Back Better World. And this year in Germany, they updated the expression of the B3W to PGII, Partnership for Global Infrastructure Investment. So, and then they promised to mobilize the 6,000 billion US dollars to contain the influences of China through the BRI. Right, so this is the very short kind of comparison and total amount of the money, especially infrastructure. So the bottom line is the global infrastructure gap between the 2020 to 2030, according to World Bank data. So international society needs almost like 27 trillion US dollars to reduce gap between the global north and global south. But if you look at the first one, the BRI plus PGII, almost like the 2 trillion US dollars, huge gap still. So we have to give some kind of the input and our voices into, I think, China and US both. Collaboration, and even collaboration, we need to mobilize much more money to support the infrastructure building for the global south as a whole. So we need kind of new voices. So how new voice comes out? Probably middle power. So middle power is kind of typical term, international relations studies. So it's not the superpower, it's like the weak power. It's like stuck in the middle, just like South Korea and then the Australia and Taiwan and New Zealand, or Nordic countries, Scandinavia and Canada, all the countries from the global south. So the South Korea and then New Zealand and Australia, so we can categorize those 3 countries except Taiwan, because Taiwan is not a member of the UN. So not officially. So 3 countries is categorized as success story in handling COVID-19. And then they support like the democracy or rule of law. So probably we can start from those 3 kind of country engagement. And already we, South Korea, have the kind of platform for so-called the middle power platform, MICTA. So Mexico, Indonesia, Turkey, South Korea, MICTA. Yeah, Australia. So the 5 countries now gathered, and they support each other, and they talk about how we can kind of balance out between the 2 different giants, China and US. And then we can extend further out of the East Asia. So like some countries in Latin America or the Canada and then Nordic countries in Europe. So the thing is okay, 5 minutes. So I will skip this part. So here, this one. So as I said, some fragmented, another level is fragmented in East Asia, Asia as a whole. So the Japan launched the so-called the TCAD, Tokyo International Conference on African Development, every 4 years, early 1991. And then China launched the very similar pattern of the collaboration with the African countries. And then Korea, jumped into this kind of competition, and India now here, and Turkey very recently, joined this game. So there's no room, in my understanding, some kind of opportunity for collaboration by all the Asian donors to Africa. So a little bit, the severe situation of the fragmentation. So this is another, I think, the factor variable we have to think of how we can boost up some kind of the third voices into the current landscape of global governance failure. So this is a very final remark. So once again, I'm going to highlight what could be right in a group to give a new voice and an alternative idea for the reformative action to the global governance in current stage. So probably the middle power, and what kind of middle power we have to talk about furthermore. So I don't have any clear answer to those questions, but maybe you can ask some questions. We can just discuss further together. Right. So thank you so much. I will stop here. Thank you.